Okay, so welcome back. This is the second part of a two-part video. In the first part, I began to share an overview of the underlying physiologic issues that are involved in generating the pain and other symptoms of fibromyalgia. And the goal of all of this is to help you understand what's going on and what you can do about it. And in the last video, I shared this really framework of the three M's, that there's your movement system, your metabolic system, and your mind-body system. And each of those are aspects of how to understand the issues in fibro, and each of them are kind of like handles about how you can work on the challenges in a way that's holistic and addresses the whole physiology. Because so many people kind of address one or two of those, but they don't address all of them. And in my experience, it doesn't tend to work so well. And so the suggestion is learn about the three M's, what they are, and the things that you can do about them. So what we're going to do today in this continuation video is to unpack a bit more of that mind-body connection and how relevant that is to not only your experience of your pain and symptoms in the moment and your function with your pain and symptoms in the moment, but also the actual disease process itself. So welcome aboard. And if you hadn't seen that first video yet, I suggest you click the link below and go to that first video so you can get up to speed before you watch this one. Thanks for being here.
Okay, so we talked about the movement system, we talked about the metabolic system. Let's talk about your mind-body system. Your thoughts, your beliefs, emotions. My view is actually that this may be the fundamental thing to do first. And I emphasize this with my patients because it's so often the thing that gets neglected. And it gets neglected because it's hard to get a handle on and because there's so much stigma around the issue of the mind-body connection. When I first got into practice and I first started talking about mind-body with patients, like I'd sit and do a whole evaluation and exam. We'd talk about the mechanical structural things and the biochemical things, and we talking about mind-body. And they go, "You mean it's all in my head?" That's what my doctor told me. He put me on an antidepressant. And it's horrible what happens, that when people have a syndrome that nobody understands, they get labeled as having depression or anxiety, and they get antidepressants thrown at them. And that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about a powerful physiology that you can take hold of to influence your whole system. You can't deny the connection of your mind and your body. And you can actually do a pretty good job denying that there's a mind and there's a body and they're separate things, because they're not separate things. And at a certain point, Western science decided they were separate things. But the more research we develop, the more we see that the profound interconnections of what you might call mind, you might call body, are so like all-encompassing that it's a continuum. It's one reality. That picture of the three realms that I sort of drew before, we'll talk about this more later, it's one realm, it's one reality. And so what I'm trying to explain to you is things that you can do with your own mind-body system that can actually not only help the way you experience pain and help with your suffering in a short-term way, but can affect and influence the overall metabolic process that generates your fibromyalgia and potentially slow it down and even arrest it. This is one of the fundamental things, is that perceived pain and your mind state are completely connected with each other. That your emotional mental state influences your pain processing. I think we talked about this before, but I really just want to emphasize that it is a loop, that pain modulates your emotional experience. When I was talking about pain pathways, we focused on kind of like that there's three stages of the periphery, and then the spinal cord, and then the brain, right? The piece that I didn't express so clearly is that there's thousands of nerves, and there's really two pathways that we've identified. There's this sensory discriminative pathway, which is the part that says, the pain is in my hand and it feels like tingling and burning. Or the pain is my foot and it feels like someone's stabbing me with a knife. And then there's what we call the emotional affective pathway. And that's the part of you that just goes, ah, right? It's the raw emotional midbrain core physiology of distress that is there to help you get up and go and deal with whatever is going on, whether you have to run away or fight or just freeze until it passes. And it's important to understand that, because you can use that to your advantage in terms of working with your mind-body connection. One aspect of that is learning to deal with those toxic emotions. And the other aspect of that is learning to distinguish your physical sensations from your emotional responses and your thoughts about them. I'm going to talk a bit more about that. So this is the first part I wanted to emphasize here, was just that, look, in the moment, your emotional mental state, your beliefs affect the way you process pain and affect how you suffer now and now and now. And the second part of this that I wanted to express is that the physiology of fibro can be driven by a chronic hyperarousal, chronic stress state, chronic sense of frustration, anger, blame, fear, and then the genetics that can underlie a predisposition to that, as well as early life trauma and unresolved distress. It influences all the physiology of fibro. Your mitochondria are, where they're doing their energy production thing, they're also responding to your stress hormones, and they're generating your stress hormones. It's integrated physiology. It's all happening there. Your state of inflammation, your hormones, your gastrointestinal function, gut feelings. Why do we talk about that? Right? It's something that people have known about forever. And in the past 10 or 20 years, we're starting to understand there's something called the gut-brain axis. And every specialty journal is talking about gut-brain axis in neurology, gut-brain axis in rheumatology, gut-brain axis in pain management, gut-brain axis in psychiatry. What's happening in your intestines affects your brain and your mind and your thoughts and your emotions. What's happening in your brain, mind, thoughts, and emotions influences your gut and all of your physiology. Part 3 here, talking about driving fibro, is the way that your mind state affects your behavior and your thoughts and how you live your life. And this is not your fault, right? And it's nobody's fault. But the fact is, if I feel crummy and I've been miserable for years, my tendency is often going to be to be inactive and eat comfort food, which tends to be sugary, fatty stuff that feeds inflammation and feeds sickness and toxicity. Maybe I'm going to be using substances like tobacco and alcohol more than I should. Maybe I'm going to be socially isolated and disconnected because, you know what, it's no fun being with people when they want to do stuff and I can't. And I say this not with blame at all. I say this just to acknowledge that part of the issue in fibro is this cycle of isolation and deconditioning and getting disconnected from life and losing the meaning and purpose of life, which can feed into the pain and feed into all of the other physiologic processes that drive it. So let's talk about what to do about it. I'm personally a big fan of mind-body training groups, and I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about why. Mind-body training is about getting tools for coping and healing with pain, and you can definitely do that on your own, and I'll speak a bit about that. Some people don't want to go out and interact with other people, and I get it. But the fact is that the social support and the social learning that happens in groups can be profoundly supportive and helpful. And the tools that you can learn involved in reducing the intensity of pain and improving sleep and suffering less from pain and living with calm and clarity and focus. This whole notion of like, I've got brain fog, I've got no energy, I can't think straight, I can't do anything. What I can tell you almost for certain is that I won't speak about everybody, but most people, if they can actually drop into a quiet mind-body state that's peaceful and calm and connect a bit with joy and connect with a bit with gravity and do that with gratitude and do that for 10 or 15 minutes, what happens on the other end is, wow, I feel a little bit more refreshed. Maybe I can go deal with that thing that I otherwise couldn't deal with. So there's a potentially profound effect on function and helping you do stuff despite the fact that you still have pain or despite the other issues that are coming up with fibromyalgia. There is a physiology of healing. When you get into a relaxed state of mind and stimulate your relaxation response and reduces the stress hormone response and the body starts to relax, there is a physiology of healing. And this has been demonstrated over and over again in various scientific studies that there's an improvement in shift in immune functioning. There's improvements in wound healing. Like it goes on in terms of like pain and anxiety and overall quality of life for people who learn how to get into a relaxed state of mind. Part of the reason why I'm such a big fan of learning this stuff is because once you learn it, it's yours. Once you learn it, you're not dependent on someone giving you a treatment, and you're not dependent on taking supplements or drugs. you've got something that actually works with the intelligence that's inside of you. I mean, all of it works with your inner healing intelligence for sure. When you take supplements or you eat the right diet, that's helping stimulate your body or taking away toxic stuff that's preventing your body from doing what it knows how to do. And that's really important, but being able to direct it intentionally with the power of your mind. Generating the physiology of healing, dissolving self-judgment, that voice that's constantly going in there that's saying, I can't, I won't, I don't deserve, I'm not enough, what's wrong with me, how come I can't do anything, whatever that voice is for you. We've all got a voice like that. But when you start to practice sitting and noticing and paying attention and start to see, you know what? That voice isn't me. That's just going on in my mind. It's somebody else's voice. It's so empowering because then you can start taking back your life and living. You can start to learn how to generate positive emotion, positive spiritual state, positive power of imagination. In the Kabbalah tradition, the Torah tradition, you got your mind and you got your body. And what lives in between is kind of like your power of imagination. And the power of imagination is working in you. And if you start to notice your thoughts, you'll see it working in you. Like, what is anxiety? Using my power of imagination to imagine something bad's going to happen in the future. It's not happening yet. It's not even real. But I'm living inside a cycle of imagination. Part of mind-body training is learning how to see that and learning how to generate positive imagination that actually helps your healing response. Whether it's an imagination about physiology and relaxation and feeling well, or imagination about how to think and be in the world, coming from your own inner drive and motivation of what you care most about and how to get back to your life. Moving down this list on the slide here, transforming trauma and negative emotions, that's part of what all these tools do. They help you relate to negative emotions like fear and anger and frustration and resentment and guilt and shame. And they actually help you rewire your physiology. There's kind of a famous expression that nerves that fire together wire together. And it's really true, and I've seen it happen in my own life, and I've seen it happen for countless patients, that when they practice regularly getting into a physiology of healing, learning to say no to their self-judgments, saying thanks for coming, but I'm not playing today, and generating positive emotions over time that has a physiologic effect on the body, and that affects your thoughts and your emotions and asks your bodily responses. So it's about developing life skills. Let's not go too much into this. We've been talking for a while. I'll probably talk about this again somewhere. The point is that there are tools, and you can learn tools, and you can learn them on your own. And if you're going to learn them on your own, the things that I really suggest people work on is finding some kind of relaxation response thing, whether it's a mantra meditation or abdominal breathing or timed breathing, 4-6 breathing, whether it's some kind of movement practice, whether it be walking meditation or Tai Chi or yoga, which also has the added benefit of working with your structural system, and emotional awareness. When you're having pain, asking yourself, what am I feeling? What's the emotion associated with the pain? And noticing what you are feeling and making a distinction between the sensation of the pain and the emotion of the pain. And also noticing what the thoughts are and letting those be separate things because they are, and realizing that those are not you, that you are the one who is experiencing those. And that distance itself, when you practice it, can become profoundly healing and create a tremendous amount of self-control and ability to cope and not being so helpless over this horrible pain. Like when you're starting to have a fibromyalgia flare, what do? You've got some tools to actually shift your physiology in that moment, shift your thoughts in that moment, shift your emotions, shift your bodily sensations and bodily responses. Journaling is incredibly powerful, and that can be an organize your mind kind of journaling, like, what do I care about today? I've got brain fog, and by the time it gets to be 2 p.m., I get lost. So when I'm fresh in the morning, let me write some notes about like what really matters to me so I can actually have that in front of me. And at 3 p.m. when I'm just like, I can realize it's Jimmy's birthday in 2 days. I just wanted to write him a note. Okay, let me do some breathing and relax and focus. I love Jimmy. I care about him so much. Yeah, I want to write him that note. And you find the energy to do it because you wrote it down and it's there in front of you. And then the other aspect of journaling is emotional expression. And this has been done in research in various inflammatory illnesses and in fibromyalgia. Sitting down and writing a letter to God or writing a letter to yourself or wherever it is, no one needs to see it, but I feel horrible and it's like this and I'm angry and I'm scared and I don't know what to do and I'm helpless and lost and that guy did this to me and I'm so angry and it's his fault. And getting your emotions into a verbal expression, you can't always talk to someone about that. If you have someone to talk to about it, great, but writing it is taking it out of your mind and putting it into a more physical form so that you can have some distance from it, so that you can understand it, so you can work constructively with it. Hopefully that makes sense. And then there's gratitude. And there's medical literature about this. There's the sages talking about this in every tradition. And there's my wife talking about it all the time, which is that gratitude is so incredibly powerful, because think about it for a second. When I have something unpleasant that happens to me in my life, what almost immediately happens is it triggers a little bit of a thought process of negativity. And if I'm predisposed to stress and hypervigilance, it can actually create a stress response and create the physiology of stress, whether it's pumping my immune system or messing up my gut or creating muscle tension in my neck or tightness in my jaw, my TMJ creating a headache, whatever it is. Everybody's got to meet and know their own stress responses in their physiology. But the point is that when I have something happens that is difficult, I have the potential to choose to be grateful. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but the fact is, like, all kinds of things happen that we don't understand. We don't really know what's going to be the outcome of something until a lot of time passes. And I can see something happens, like this guy got elected or that guy got elected or he won the primary or she said this on television, and I can create a whole spiral. Or I can say, you know what can I be grateful for right now? And being grateful is a way of generating a mindset and a biochemistry and a physiology that's a positive direction. It's a way of interrupting that cycle of thought, emotion, physiology that can contribute to that suffering, contribute to that disease process, contributing to a flare-up of your pain. Okay, so let's talk a bit more about the 3Ms and the 3 modes of self-care. I gave a ton of information. I don't want you to be overwhelmed by it. Maybe just take a deep breath for a second. Close your eyes. Feel your feet on the ground. Feel your body resting in your chair. And just feel a few inhalations and exhalations happen. And let your hands be supported by whatever they're resting on. And feeling an inhalation, and as you exhale, letting your hands relax and be heavy. And feeling an inhalation, and as you exhale, letting your feet relax and be heavy. Okay, let's talk a little bit more. I don't think I have so many more minutes left, so bear with me because I'm going to talk about some practical stuff. So, your movement structural system. Here are the things that I recommend to my patients. Physical treatments to your focal pain sources. Do it with someone who knows what they're doing. You've got fibromyalgia, do it with someone who knows fibromyalgia. If you're going to see a massage therapist, a manual physical therapist, someone who does craniosacral, someone who does acupuncture, ask them, how many people with fibromyalgia have you treated? And make sure it's a lot, because you want somebody who understands it, who can address those focal pain sources. Start moving, and moving in a way that works for you within your threshold. Mitochondrial dysfunction means that your muscles have a lowered threshold because they're not producing as much energy. If you go over the threshold, you create oxidative stress, inflammation, more mitochondrial dysfunction, and a flare-up. So you find your threshold, you stay within it. If you want to do something simple like walking, walk a block and then see how you feel an hour later. I felt okay. Then walk a block again. And tomorrow walk a block, 2 blocks. And do that for a week, and then walk 3 blocks, and gradually build up your walking. If you have the access and the interest, have an open mind and do some kind of mindful movement. Find a Feldenkrais class that teaches awareness through movement. It's all these really subtle, like you get on the floor, you move your eyes and your neck and your shoulder. It's really powerful stuff to unlock some of those neuromuscular restricted patterns that people get. Gentle Tai Chi, yoga, again, talk to the teacher in advance, and find someone who knows how to work with people with fibromyalgia. Metabolic biochemical. This is a bit of a big picture. The last thing I'm going to share is like the small picture, but these are some of the things that are my first line suggestions to people. When someone's got a ton of pain and they're really suffering and they're not taking chronic long-acting narcotics, low-dose naltrexone is one of my first choices. It's a medication that's been repurposed. It gets used in large doses for opioid addiction. In tiny doses, it actually tricks your body to produce more of your naturally occurring pain-blocking chemicals. That does two things. One thing is it blocks pain, when it also potentially increases energy and potentially reduces irritable bowel syndrome. It gets used for a lot of different things. The second thing is that it reduces inflammatory chemicals and reduces glial activation. So a lot of people with fibromyalgia report dramatic improvements in pain. And in my experience, it's so much better tolerated than Lyrica and Cymbalta. And for me, it's a first-line agent. It doesn't always work for everybody. And for some people, it's the whole thing they need. And for some people, they need more than that. But it's a great way to start because, let me ask you a question. If you were suddenly feeling 60% better, what impact would that have on your life? Most people would say, wow, that would be a big impact. It would help me a lot to feel 68% better. And so that's why I'm a fan of LDN. Sometimes it's hard to find a doctor to prescribe it. There are people who do it online. I do it online. The next thing, PEA is palmitoyl ethanolamine. It's a natural product that's it's like a fatty substance that's involved in cell membranes. It may work through the cannabinoid system of the body. It's been shown in a bunch of research studies to help people with chronic pain, to help with irritable bowel syndrome. It has an effect on mast cells, which are a kind of immune cell that are involved in driving glial activation and irritable bowel syndrome. So a lot of people get a positive effect from that. That's over the counter. CBD is another story. That's a whole topic unto itself. As you probably know, depending on where you live, it's either easy or hard to get medical cannabis and CBD as well. CBD is usually easier. There is full spectrum CBD, and then there's purified CBD. The cannabis plant, the hemp plant, has hundreds of active compounds that are involved in things like reducing inflammation, blocking pain transmission, enhancing mood, various things like that. And when they purify it so much and it's just CBD, you're missing a lot of good stuff. So if I were going to try it and I had fibromyalgia, I'd look for full spectrum hemp oil. A lot of different brands. It's like the Wild West. I can't recommend a particular one. An elimination diet followed by a low antigen diet. This is worth a whole talk, maybe even a little mini course, because it's not so easy to do, to understand what it's about. But the point is like this. Food sensitivity testing can be really confusing and hard to interpret. We don't have good data telling us, whether it really works and really helps predict what things or people are really sensitive to do. A lot of people develop antibodies, even though that particular food that they have an antibody to isn't causing any clinical issue. But some people are really sensitive to foods. And so gluten, dairy, refined sugar, corn, and soy in various ways activate a lot of people. And so do artificial sweeteners and flavor enhancers like MSG. Those are excitatory chemicals. They seem to stimulate glutamate. That's probably part of why they taste good, because they go to your brain and say, and they give you sort of a rush, right? They taste good and they stimulate pleasure in your brain because they're excitatory. If you have fibromyalgia, your brain's already excited enough. So start looking at labels. Find things like textured vegetable protein, which has typically got MSG in it. Find artificial sweeteners. I know people who have just stopped drinking Diet Coke, and it's not clear if it was the caffeine or the NutraSweet, but their fibromyalgia was 80% better from that. So you got to experiment. Everyone's an individual. And in my opinion, an elimination diet is the best way to identify food sensitivities. And it's not that you stop food forever. You stop it for 4 or 5 weeks and you see how you feel. It's best to stop everything at once. It's like you take the drawer, you dump it out, you put the drawer back in, you eat other stuff. It's helpful to get nutritional support on this. At some point, maybe I'll make a course or do more lectures. I don't know. Let me know if that would be useful for you, and maybe I can put it together. But the point is, after 5 weeks or so, You put one thing at a time for a week and you see what happens. And if suddenly your symptoms come back, or you start to develop irritable bowel or pain or a headache and a brain fog when you start eating gluten, then stop eating gluten for a while. And then after that, you go through that process with all the foods that you eliminate, and then you learn what's causing sensitivity. The diet after you do an elimination diet is also important. Low antigen and lots of colorful foods because it's full of antioxidants. This is a whole topic unto itself. Magnesium, there's randomized controlled trials showing that number of people with fibromyalgia improve from getting magnesium, oral magnesium. Same thing with vitamin D. Clinical trials. We don't have big clinical trials because it's nutrients and who's going to pay for it. I typically recommend people that they take B complex along with mitochondrial nutrients. Mitochondrial nutrients include CoQ10, alpha lipoic acid, and acetyl L-carnitine. Everybody's different in what they're going to respond to, but those things kind of work together in your mitochondria along with magnesium, and it's part of your cellular energy production. And there's some studies showing that CoQ10 and ALA can actually help with things like neuropathy and fibromyalgia pain. The final thing is a probiotic, which can help potentially adjust your biome. And again, none of these things are meant to be necessarily the rest of your life. The important thing is to do them together with some kind of practitioner who can help you make choices about what to do, when, and how long to do it for. But these are some of the things that help a lot of people. So part 3 of the 3 M's is mind-body healing. And we talked about this in depth, I think. But figuring out how to generate the relaxation response and learning mindfulness and starting to understand your patterns of stress reactivity, how stress affects your thinking and how it affects your emotions and how it affects your physiologic responses so that you can start to be aware and make choices about how to respond to stressful situations. And then the last thing is developing tools for healing trauma and healing your emotional distress. And that can be meditation. It can be stuff that you might learn with a therapist like EMDR or EFT or TAT. There's other techniques as well. So here's the short version, okay? This is like the take home. What would I do first if I had fibromyalgia or if my best friend had it and they didn't have time or money to go to some practitioner? Find a relaxation response mindfulness group and learn it. Practice it, get used to it, find a group of people to do it with. Do an elimination diet. Start LDN at 1.5 milligrams and increase to 4.5 milligrams and do it for at least 8 weeks. Find someone who knows how to prescribe it, because if you got really bad fatigue, you might need to start at a lower dose. There's an art to titrating and increasing the dose. Everybody's an individual. Nutrients, B complex, magnesium, vitamin D, CoQ10, probiotic. Some people would say fish oil, omega-3 fatty acids, also not a bad idea. You want to make sure you get good supplements. And then some kind of mindful movement, whether it's walking in a calm way or yoga or Tai Chi or a Feldenkrais. So I just want to come back to this diagram again, okay? Because we talked in depth about these 3 things: mind, metabolism, movement. And the reason I made these in a circle like this is to show that the intersection, there's something really important happening. And what's happening at the intersection is the vitality and the aliveness and the miracle that is you. Because whether you believe in God or evolution, there's an intelligence that moves through you. And it was with you when you were born. And it's got the blueprint of your life, and that's how your body and mind developed. And there may be challenges and difficulty, but that intelligence is still there. And all of these different things that I'm suggesting to you are ways of helping that intelligence function more effectively, because that's really what heals you. You've got fibromyalgia, there's hope. Don't believe the people who say there's no hope. And also have an open mind to other things that you can do, and make sure to keep studying and learning. And study what's real for you and what doesn't work for you. The journal that you can keep to do your emotional processing can be also part of keeping clear records about what you do and what helps and what doesn't help, and exactly what happens, so that you might find somebody who can potentially help you. And if you have a record of what you've tried and not tried, that can help you so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I wish you well. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Please go down to the right corner of the screen and click that share button. And I'll keep sharing more information that's meant to inspire and support you in your healing journey. Remember that your healing journey starts with you, and it's about you. And it's about you empowering yourself. And I wish you all the best. And Look forward to being in touch.